Today is October 29th, 2019. I am interviewing James G. Staples at the Butler VA Medical Center in Butler, PA. Mr. Staples is 70 years of age and was born on July 16, 1949. My name is Chuck Jennings, the interviewer. I am being assisted by Kurt Espin, the videographer. Mr. Staple, what branch of service were you in?
The United States Marine Corps.
And during that time, what was the highest rank you achieved?
E5, Sergeant E5.
And where was your location of your service?
The stateside, but then in Vietnam and Hawaii.
Before we get involved in your military experience, let's start back. Where did you grow up and go to high school at?
I was raised in Shaler Township in the North Hills of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I graduated from high school, from Shaler High School in 1967, June 6th, I believe.
Now, while you were in high school, did you participate in any sports or?
Yeah, I did wrestling and football, but I was pretty small. When I enlisted in the Marines, I only weighed 127 pounds, so I wasn't a very good athlete.
Well, yeah, you had mentioned before that during your junior and senior year, in order to raise money, you got a job. Where was it at?
Yeah, I went to McKnight Road and got a job at Tom McCann's Shoes on McKnight Road, and that's how I worked after school and on weekends to earn money. And that's so I could buy a little motorcycle that was Honda 160, and I ended up buying my parents' car. Was a 56 Ford Fairlane 500 convertible. And because I worked, I paid for my own clothes and everything I needed. My dad didn't have to spend any money, and I covered my own insurance, things like that.
Yeah, speaking of your family, your family's kind of like a military family. Could you go into that just briefly?
Oh yeah, well, my dad flew B-17 bombers during World War II. I guess he was stationed in Iceland and England, and then they went into France and things. But he started at the beginning of the war and survived all the way to the end. And it was ironic that he says, and then one day they told me, John, go home. And that's what happened to me is in Vietnam. One day they came up to me and says, Jim, go home.
Your mother was involved in the service.
My mother was a WAC, and she did training down in Texas and Louisiana during World War II, and my sister, who was a year older than me, when she graduated, she went into the Navy and was at Pensacola Air Station for the Navy.
Well, in around June of '67, you decided to make a change in your course in your life, and you tried joining some services. Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, I was trying to get my dad to let me get in, but I was only 17 years old at the time. And finally he signed the papers, and on July 5th, 1967, I went down to the federal building and enlisted in the Marines. Delayed entry because I actually went to boot camp as of September 7th, and probably saved my life because those 2 months got me later, but those, from my schedule, the way I got through the service, it turns out that I would have been in the Tet Offensive from beginning throughout, and I was at the end of it, which was plenty for me. I saw plenty of action.
During that delay in entry, what did you do? You have a girlfriend?
Oh, yeah, I had a girlfriend, Susan, and my motorcycle, and, you know, just dated and ran around. There was not much, you know, you just knew you were going into the service, and in my case, I was going into the Marines because I had gone into the federal building to sign up, but the Air Force told me that the chances were I would be stationed someplace else and I wouldn't be in Vietnam, and the Navy told me that I would be in a boat in the Mediterranean or Indian Ocean, and I didn't want to go in the Army, so I walked into the Marine Corps recruiter and I says, "What's the chance of me going to Vietnam?" He says, "Sign here, I guarantee it." So I did, because being in the military, I wanted to go in.
So once you boarded the airplane, where did you end up? Well, you went down to the federal building.
Yeah.
Did you take your oath of office down the federal building then?
Yeah, I took the oath of office, and then on September, when I went in, they swore us in or did something again, and then put us on a bus and took us out to Greater Pittsburgh Airport. And the problem is that day, my father had another heart attack, and well, I was at the Greater Pittsburgh Airport when I found out from my father's best friend came in and told me, you know, because my parents were coming out. So I said, "Well, we'll go." Well, the Marine who had us there, he's had the Marines grab me and says he is not to leave, and they literally stuck me on an airplane and sat on me until it took off. And it wasn't until at boot camp I found that you could request mass, and that I request mass to call home to see if my dad was alive. And my drone instructor walked me to the payphone, gave me a quarter. I called home and I said, "Well, how's Dad?" My mom says, "He's gonna be okay. He's still in the hospital, but he's okay." I said, "Oh, good. He's gonna be right." Yeah, and the drone instructor took it out of my hand and hung it up. But at least I got to know he was still alive.
Well, that was done in Paris Island.
Yes.
And that was back in the old wooden barracks, old wooden white barracks.
Yeah, the World War II.
So, you know, explain a little bit about boot camp, what you did there, rifle range,
Yeah.
you know, just what you did for your 8 weeks.
Oh, well, it was accelerated because of the casualties of 1967, 68, and I guess so they, instead of 13 weeks in boot camp, they cut it back to 8. And boot camp was okay. I was in good enough shape I could keep up running and physically doing push-up, pull-ups and stuff. It wasn't until we had a forced march out to the air rifle range that I got shin splints from that, and I ended up getting yelled at because I ended up slowing up quite a bit. I couldn't walk anymore. And but when we went out to the rifle range, I had known how to shoot basically, but they went through their method and that until the first day of sighting in and actually shooting. It didn't qualify or didn't count for anything, but they kept track of the scores. And I didn't qualify. And they pulled us at the end of the day. They pulled us, all the guys who didn't qualify, and they were all upset. The drill instructors were pretty upset. So they marched us all into a gear locker where they had buffing machines and mops and buckets and stuff, and crowded us, about 15 of us in there, and opened a bottle of ammonia and poured it over us and locked the door. And then they had us sing the Marine Corps hymn before they'd let us out. It was pretty nasty. Everybody was getting sick and gagging, and it was terrible. But the next day I qualified, so I guess it worked. Got my attention, you know. And pretty much that was it. I got through there, you know, graduated. My parents came down. I saw my dad, and then they sent me to Camp Lejeune for the infantry training.
Now, did you get leave from boot camp to advanced infantry?
I think I was on a 20-day, and I came home and ran around with Susan for that, and most of my friends had gone to college, so when I got back, there wasn't many people. My friends, they weren't around anymore. They were gone.
So at Quantico, what did they designate you to be?
Oh, I went to Quantico, Virginia for ordnance school, and I got my MOS at 2311 for ordnance, and I went through that. There's ordnance, and then there's advanced, which is EOD, explosive ordnance and disposal. And I thought that was fun because you got to play with the bombs and bullets and different things under muddy water, and to identify them and defuse them and stuff, and I thought that was pretty great. But I wasn't there for that, but they knew I was interested, so they would show me different things.
Once you completed that section of your training, where did you take your jungle training at?
Well, I went home again, I think for like 7 days, and then I went to California. What was it, camp? Even camp, I don't know. I don't remember the name.
Seven Palms?
But, huh?
Seven Palms?
No. It was in Camp Pendleton and itself, but it was, my barracks, again, was an old World War II barracks, and it was right next to the brig, because I hear every morning they would come over to the loudspeaker and reveille, everybody get up.
So what did they teach you in your jungle training?
Oh, it was just firing weapons, throwing hand grenades, and looking at all the different booby traps and how to disarm them, and how to avoid them, things like that. What you did in case you saw one. And I had got a lot of that in ordnance school, because one of our tests was to check for mines where they had a switch in the bottom. So,
So if you pick up the mine, the real explosion would kick off in the bottom.
Right, yeah.
So you flew to San Francisco?
Yeah, that was Norton Air Force Base, I think, and I landed in there, and then we took out of there and flew to Hawaii. they refueled, but they wouldn't let us off the plane in Hawaii. And then we flew from there to Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa. Yeah. So that's where they take your sea bag from you and have you sign for your power of attorney and make sure you got your insurance paid up and pay and that everything that they even checked your teeth before you left for overseas there.
Now, once all that was completed, what was that, about a week?
Yeah, it was kind of confusing because we would have something to do and then we were let go, and most of the time we spent at the Animal Pit Enlisted Club and got loaded, you know, so, and then the next morning. So I'm not sure, it was somewhere, that's where my dates kind of disappear.
Because when you start traveling long distances, they do disappear.
Yeah, and I couldn't remember exactly what day I landed in Vietnam. It's April something, but it could have been the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th.
Well,
somewhere.
So you landed in Da Nang.
In Da Nang, yes.
Yeah, so unfortunately, you were kind of like in a bullpen. Can you go into that a little bit with the jets?
Yeah, well, that was on a DC-10, and so it's about 300 people. And when we got off, it was like 95, hit you like a brick. It was humid and then you had to unload the plane with the sea bags and carry them over, and they put you into this 3-foot high wall there on the tarmac, and there was about 600 people there, and we landed about 10 o'clock at night, and at first it was kind of exciting because all the Phantom jets and all these other fighter jets were, you know, just 20, 30 yards away from you, and they were turning right there and then would take off down the runway. And it was exciting if you've never seen a jet take off, but it's really loud. I mean, really loud, and it stinks of jet fuels and stuff. And it wasn't long before I'm trying to scrounge around for cigarette butts off the ground, and you work them to get the filter out and stick them in your ear. But even that didn't work. I had folded up a towel I had into kind of a square and put it over, and like that, over my ears. And we tried to go into the big buildings, but they kept chasing us out. We weren't allowed to go in there until they would put up a big piece of paper with your name that your orders were available, and then you could go in only if you were on that list, and then you'd sit down and then they'd call you up from that list and away you went. There was somebody there to take in. When I finally got in, it was 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was assigned to go to a place called Fubai, and that's what I did. I got on a C-123, and but the only thing I can remember is the horrible night trying. It's just so loud, like being on an aircraft carrier, and you're the only one that doesn't have ear protection. And that was my first night in country. And I flew into Fubai, which I had no idea where that was. And a truck came and got me and took me out to the ammo dump, ASP-1 Fubai. And it's, you know, that's where I was stationed from was Fubai. And that was an ammo dump set out from the main part of the main compound. It was set out all by itself with some other compounds and communications towers on the big hills around us. But it was pretty much out there. It turns out we were outside. Fubai is on the shore, but we're outside the city of Wei is where it turns out it was. And on the first day I met my commanding officer, Lieutenant Nat, and my gunny. And they told me what we were going to do and welcomed me as such and that, and asked me if I had any questions or that. And I says, yeah. I says, I didn't come to become a Marine and be in the rear with the gear, that if there was any opportunities to go into combat, I wanted to volunteer from day one. So shortly after, I think the next day, I was coming back after lunch, and Lieutenant Nat called me over and says, get your helmet, flak jacket, and rifle, and you're going with EOD. And the EOD guys have a lot of rank, like staff sergeant, gunnies, warrant officers, and officers, and they only get 45 pistols. So they took 2 Marines riflemen with them, and we would drive into the city of Wei to, they had something that they had to do. The EOD guys, I would just carry, they had boxes of C4 and det cord and blasting caps and stuff. And that was my job, was they'd say, grab this, and away we go. And I guess they found bombs and booby traps and stuff, and the EOD guys would go do that. I was the gopher and the guy with a rifle. So, and then we'd go back, and that's what a lot of afternoons were until about day 10. I was in country day 10 or 11, that the Army, who had an LZ inside the ammo dump at Fubai, they would have all this ammunition in there, and they would get helicopters and put it in these slings and hook it up and take it to emergency resupply. So as turns out, I was coming back from lunch, and the helicopter they had too long of a lead or something on it, and the helicopter wasn't over top of the load when they hooked on to him. And when he pulled up, it started swinging underneath him, and you could see it, and he was going sideways and doing different things, trying to correct and get over this thing, but it was swinging, and he ended up turning around and hit the tail rotor on a Conex box, and then he just came down on top of I'd say 3 pallets of ammo that he was on, but it crashed on top of it. And at this point, all the Army guys whose hooches were across from there, they come out, and there was, it turns out to be 20, 30 of them running around trying to get the guys out, and I just went up to my barracks, which was just the road, the hooches, and the commanding officer, he told us, he says, no, they can handle it. We'll just protect the ammo, I went in the back. He got us out of the way because things, they started after a little bit. It wasn't right away, but it started blowing up. And that's when all hell broke loose. So I was in the back in a bunker, and the one guy come by. He was a corporal, I think, and he just come on, Marine, come with me. I went after him, and we ran out into the dump to the powder magazines. They have these big black containers for 8-inch and 155s and 175s. It's just the powder charge because the projectiles are separate, not like the 105s, which come like a bullet. And to go there and just look for sputers and things like that. And then that was my day, other than when I went back and then I was in a bunker, just a fighting hole bunker, and we're all just sitting around, and some of the things blew up and were coming through the hooches, and I got hit in the leg. It bounced through and bounced off of the side of the fighting hole I was in, and stuck in my leg, a big chunk of shrapnel. And it's really hot, and it's stuck in my leg. And jumping around, I got that off, and that I just put some, tried to cover it with a Band-Aid, but it was bleeding too much. And one of the guys had a gauzes, and we put a piece of gauze over it and pressed on it. And the next day when I went into Main Side, because of the explosions, we just stayed there. And I went and they scrubbed it out, hurt like heck, but the flap, the flap come off, and they had to cut the piece of skin off, and they gave me this tube of stuff and a shot and whatever, and just told me to keep it clean and gave me some gauzes and sent me on my way. But it came up about a Purple Heart, and they told me, no, you don't get a Purple Heart from getting shot by your own guys. But I still got a hole in my left leg that I remember.
So, where were you off to from that point?
Well, I still went out to there, but the guys, right after this, like within a day or so after the explosion, the guys that were from Fubai that had been sent up to Quezon, they were the guys who did the ammunition during the siege, and they got pulled back. And they says, okay, and it called us in, and myself, Hall, Wakefield, and Herrera says, get your gear packed, you're leaving in the morning to take their place in Quezon. Okay, so that's what I did. I packed a sea bag, and next morning they took us into Main Side, Fubai, and we caught a convoy.
Okay.
Yeah, just a convoy at this point, and we drove. I mean, I don't know the roads, but we went through different places and that. And, you'd cross a bridge where the guys were walking on the bridge and their job was to shoot at anything that was in the water. And so as you're driving through, they're shooting at anything that could be floating down to make they shot, one on each side of the bridge. And, but we went up north past, what was it? I don't know. Eventually, we got into Dong Ha, and I think Wayfielder Hall had guys that he went through ordnance school with that were up there in Dong Ha. So they helped us by getting us up through the chow halls, because they had a signature where you had to show a pass to get food and that. And they lived, and they had a movie theater there, which I had never seen. And they had outdoor movie theater. Everybody would bring out their chair and sit and watch the movies in the evenings, you know. But the next morning at 6 o'clock, we found out that they had a early group that would get on a truck, and they would go into the dump first. Went through the chow hall, and then we got into the trucks with the first crew that went in to start up the forklifts and stuff, get them warmed up and gassed and whatever they do. So we went there, and we found out that this is where the LZ was in there, and they said, oh, we got hops all the time going out from the LZ up in the caisson, which is where we were going. So they put us up there, and we just sat around on the hillsides or berms, and after 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, people started showing up, but then artillery and rockets started screaming in overhead, and you could just hear them, and they hit at the far end of the ammo dump, which was bulk fuel, and they hit in bulk fuel. I don't know, it might have been 7 to 10 rounds hit in there, and I'm sitting there going, geez, wow, that's the first incoming I heard. And we sat there going, oh geez, what do we do now? And we're just watching. And then another salvo of rounds comes overhead, but they were shorter, and they hit at the end of the dump. Now, I'm not familiar with what was where in this dump, and I'd never been there. But the hit more into the bulk fuel, and everything was burning, big black clouds. But that time they blew something up in the berms that they would sit into, and here's the fuel running down the hill like lava into the ammo dump, you know. And it was just amazing. But I just had, you know, maybe 25 rounds of artillery or rockets, but I think it was artillery because it all hit in the same area. It wasn't scattered out. It was in a general area. And we all sat there and going, well, geez, we could have to fight the fires. And then he says, well, I don't know what to do at this point. You know, there's nobody in charge of you. And so I just, I sat there and I'm looking around and the guy says, well, I'm going down here. I said, well, I'll go down that way. And I'm reading the Dodaks on the ammunition there, so I can tell what's what, whether it's high explosives, illumination, or rifle bullets or something, which I don't care about because they don't explode, they pop like popcorn if they're burnt. But everything's in pine boxes in there for the most part. So I went down and that, and it started blowing up at the far end. So I just stayed back and was trying to get a vantage point where I could see. And the other guys, they were going, we're out of here, you know? And I said, well, I'm gonna go down here. And I went there for an hour or so, was looking to see if any sputers, or when they would blow up, it would always blow stuff up and then come down, and sometimes it was just hot metal, sometimes it was pallets of whatever blew up, just blew out a pallet, and then you knew that was lost because I couldn't move it. And so I ran around and did what I could to put out fires, but I was thirsty. I'd left everything in a fighting hole near the LZ, so I went back to the LZ to get my water, and that turned out that I stayed there too long, and it blew up and started, and anyway, it got behind me, and it was big stuff. So I got into another fighting hole that had a roof, like a half culvert, and it had sandbags over top, but it had a space about like that where you could see out on the sides. It had like a step out here where you could get in and get underneath it, and it was just like, oh boy. Some of the stuff was going, and I just went down and hid. I tried looking up, but I got into that area where it was open, and something blew up, and the blast knocked all kinds of stuff, and it got me from underneath my helmet to here, and part of my face and shoulder. And I got hit with shrapnel and little rocks and pebbles and junk like that. And so I quit looking out. And then the concussions started getting bigger and bigger. And next thing I knew is I was face down in the bunker. And my glasses had fallen off. And I'm looking for them because apparently at that time I got knocked unconscious by one of the detonations. And so I found my glasses and put them back on and was sitting there hiding in the bottom of this hole. And sometime later I found myself down unconscious in the dirt, or I was waking up coughing in this dust and stuff, and I got my glasses, found them again, put them in my pocket where I could put buttons and so I wouldn't lose them. And then a little bit later I woke up and it was dark. So I got knocked unconscious again, I guess a couple times or something. You don't know it because you're there and then you're unconscious. It's like getting knocked out by Mike Tyson. You're going, I'll get him, and the round's over with you. But you don't feel it hit you so much. It's so big, the concussion drops you. So I was trying to get my bearings and figure out what's going on, and the thing is just rocking in every direction. And something hit close to me, and it collapsed the top of the bunker, that culvert, and it came down on me, and I basically lost it digging my way out. And I was sitting there using my rifle till the rest of my arms on, and I was sitting in a little trench to get in, staying out of the blast, and I had just got my legs out, worked them out, and I tried standing up, but I kept falling over because of the concussions, I guess. And I tried walking, and I used my rifle as a kind of a cane, and I would fall over, but basically I crawled out of an exploding ammo dump, and I got down to the fence and followed a fence line until there was a part with a big hole in it, and I got outside the fence into where they staged trucks and convoys and stuff, big open areas, so the bombs and bullets were, the sparks as it was exploding was further away. And I went out, walked out, crawled, and stumbled my way out to where I could see trucks on the highway. And I got as far as the highway, and I was having trouble standing up, and nobody would stop to pick me up. So I stood there, and I saw a vehicle coming, so I pointed it at them. Well, they stopped all right. It was a Jeep, and it turns out it was the commanding officer, a bird colonel, and the first top sergeant running around, and I'm standing there, and he comes, the top sergeant comes up to me, and he's doing this, and I can't hear him speaking, no, and he said, "Can you hear me?" And I'm there, "No," and he says, "No," and we were trying, the colonel was actually driving, the colonel, and he was the commanding officer of Dong Ha. And I got back there, and they put me in the back seat. Something was in the back seat because I had to sit behind the commanding officer, and the top sergeant would turn to me, and he says, and I says, he would tell me, because I guess I was screaming. I was pretty excited, and that, but I can't hear. I've been in there since 8 o'clock this morning. And I said, I'm trying to get to Quezon, and I'm trying to get to ammo company, but I don't know where they are. Again, I had been brought there by a truck, and I don't know Dong Ha at all. So anyway, they brought me over, and it was probably, I know it was late because the movie was over, and they finished just before 11 o'clock. And I walked around, hobbling around, and sat in a bunker and ran into my other 3 buddies. And they come over, and that was, oh, okay, you're alive. yeah, glad to see you guys too. And then, we just slept on the bunkers right there on the sandbags. That's where you slept. And the next morning, we went to someplace to a convoy or a LZ. Turns out we sat there for a couple hours and nothing showed up. There wasn't anything there to be shipped anyway. And we got out, and somebody told one of us that there was a convoy leaving, going towards Quezon. There's a bunch of places there. So we found it, and I jumped on to a tire truck. It was for big tires, with on rims, but they were truck tires. And I was just sitting on them, made comfortable, and away it left. And we went past the rock pile and those places, but it's jungle and brush and little villages and stuff, until we got up to Kalu and Kamlo and somebody said if you go here, there was I think a truck that was going to LZ Stud. I don't know at this time. I don't know a thing about there. I'd never been there. So, but it was an LZ, and it turns out it's a big LZ, and there's a lot of people there, and we got on a hop and flew into Quezon out of LZ Stud.
It wasn't the Huey, it was the older Sikorsky with the high seat in the front, with the bubble in the front.
Well,
Jumper.
yeah, most of the time up there they had those Chickasaws, and they had the big exhaust pipe and looked like a big bug. But it was weird. I had to go, when I was in Quezon, one of my jobs was to go up to these hilltops and inventory the ammunition, but find out what they want, because we're going to close Quezon. So whatever you need, if you got mortars, machine guns, what do you have? What do you need? What do you want? You know, we'll make a sling and get it to you. Well, when I went up to 861, that particular one, the helicopter could get up so high and we could see the bottom portion of 861, but the helicopter couldn't get high enough to land. So we had to go back and have 3 guys get out and then try it again. And so I spent a couple days on that. I found a commanding officer, told him what I was doing, and he actually got me in touch with an Australian forward observer, and this guy would stay up all night, and he was at where the lower part, they had a 4-deuce mortar down there, and then it went up a hill, and then there was a flat part, and the commanding officer and that were on the higher ground. But there he meaning the Australian, had dug a hole into the hillside, and there was a big ditch where you could run alongside, and you would dig a hole out, and then they used empty ammo boxes to build a room inside, fill it with dirt, and it wasn't big, but you could build a place big enough to lay down and get outside of the ring. And so he let me stay there with him, and I got to see him call in airstrikes in the valleys below and see with his scopes and different things that I had never seen. And I went back because we were running around in Quezon. Each one of us did something different in Quezon as we were going. The staff sergeant from EOD was in charge of us. I can't remember his name, but he would have this one go here and that. And one day I was over in the Montagnard, where they're the Arvins. Well, they were called the Brew, was the tribe, and they had their families with them. The women just wore skirts and the kids ran around naked. And I had a big berm that they had dug with a bulldozer down into the ground, and it was 8 feet down, and they would put the ammunition down there, so if it blew up, they quit trying to stack it on the ground because it kept getting blown up. And they side walls had that red clay had fallen in and was on the ammo, so we were cutting bands and that, and then but they couldn't get a truck in there, so the truck's up here, and it turns out that with the tailgate out, it was too high, so the Montagnard group would bring them over, and then they would stack them up, and then me and the driver were tall enough that we could reach up and put them on a tailgate, and then they had a group that would take it and stack it in the truck. So, but sometime every day they shot artillery and rockets at us every day, multiple times, different times during the day. You get rockets and artillery, but I'm standing on most of the stuff was 105 howitzer artillery, and at the same time we're collecting it and moving it, and that one day, one of the other berms, something, I don't know, I think it was 81s, but it got hit with, all I know is rockets and artillery are loud and frightening as hell, but when they hit an explosive, it's worse. I mean, times 10, and it hit a pallet, and it just was wham! It wasn't your average just blow up, it just blew up. And I remember the driver jumping into this truck, and Montagnard's diving out, and he's taking off with the ammo boxes falling off of the truck, and we're running to hide, but we're running to hide with ammo dumps. I mean, in there, next to ammo, which was even worse. So, but then sometimes that was my other experience. But we had one big berm that we started building a final blow, where all this junk ammo, we were taking the 105s out of their boxes and canisters, and we were stacking them down there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and then 81s and 4-deuce mortars and all that stuff, all high explosives and that, and then they mix in some illumination and stuff, but this thing, I was there for almost 60 days, so it was a big pile. We had a big pile, and we found a 500-pound bomb. At the end, we saved it and drug and rolled this 500-pound bomb center on top of this huge thing that was actually had grown from like 8 feet deep to above the ground. And I was there till the end. I went to 558. I went there to inventory their stuff, and it was a strange place because it was a LZ in the middle of nowhere with no perimeter really. I mean, it wasn't like there was buildings and stuff. And when I got there, and there were doing airstrikes flying over us, dropping artillery or bombs and stuff in that, and it was just, everybody was pretty much hiding, and I guess they had snipers, and I was there, and I went over to Water Buffalo You gotta remember, I had the same clothes on from the day I left Fubai. So I was in there for 50, 60 days. I was in these, my pants and shirt, and the soil is red. And I was pretty red. Everything, my toothbrush was, if I could find somebody that had toothpaste, I'd do that. And that was about as close as I got. And I went over to fill my canteen, and unfortunately I had left my helmet because I was sitting on it. And I just wanted to fill my canteen, and the LZ, these group of folks got out, and one of them was a Marine, I believe he was a captain, and he saw me and he started yelling and screaming at me that I was a disgrace to the Marine Corps. And I pulled out my cover, which was in my pocket, and put it on. Yes, well, sorry, sir, but he wouldn't let me explain. And he says, you will salute a Marine officer every time. And I says, I'm trying to explain to him, but sir, we nod and good afternoon, sir. Acknowledge he's an officer, but it don't salute him. That don't draw attention. But this guy had starched utilities, stateside kind of utilities. But he just was yelling and screaming at me for being dirty, and not like I was doing it on purpose. If he looked around, pretty much everybody who had been here a while looked the same, orangish red. And he did. I saluted him. Yes, sir. No, sir. No. And he was done yelling at me, and I saluted him again. And geez, and everybody was looking at him, all the grunts, and everybody's around him. So when they'd go by, and there we were, everybody is saluting the hell out of this guy. And I guess nobody told him that in combat you don't salute, especially out where we were. And within the hour, they medevaced him out. He had been sniped. And I don't know, I feel bad but he really brought it on himself, and he wouldn't listen to the dirty little PFC. He was an officer, and he was the only one who could talk, and he was the only one that was right.
So tell me about when they lit the 8-foot deep worth of munitions off.
Oh, well, that was, we were working towards the end of the shutdown of Quezon. I had it, before that, I had gone around and we had all these a truckload of thermite grenades. So they sent us around, the four of us, we went around, and because they had bulldozed all the B-52s and C-130s and all this stuff, they pulled them into piles and tried to mush them up with bulldozers, but they were still there. So we got in them and started melting trucks, the engines, the transmissions, the rear ends, and motors in the helicopters, and anything we could find. We were just melting to see who could melt through the engines faster and doing this kind of stuff. And then the last day, everybody was getting out, and I kept seeing convoys and helicopters leaving and stuff. Well, the last morning when I got up, we got the, okay. I took a walk and I found a mule. And I rode this mule down the airstrip in Quezon and noticed that there's nobody here except for me. And I'm on this mule on this airstrip that's beach mat and it's all shot up, but it's patched. And I'm doing one of these. And I got out because I had never been there, and I walked to the very end of the, and looked down. It dropped off in this thing, in this beautiful valley, that thing, the Quaviet River or something, some kind of river was down there, and here's this beautiful vision, and I just turned white as a ghost. I says, if I'm gonna die, it's gonna be right here, because I'm standing out in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody else here. I jumped on the mule and got out of there, but I wish I had a camera, because that was the most beautiful picture right from the end of the thing. This valley, peaks all over, beautiful scenery. So went back and got the guys, and they sent in 3 choppers, as I thought, remember, with grunts in them to provide security. And then they sent in a Chinook helicopter for us, and the ones we were, they said, everybody ready? Got your stuff? Okay, you guys get on the Chinook. So we got our stuff and sat down on the Chinook, and then a little bit later, the 3 grunts, Hueys, they went up and hovered, and everybody sat there waiting on the staff sergeant. He was in charge of the blow. He had to set the timer and stuff. And so that was that, and he finally comes trotting back and says, okay, let's go. And all the Hueys took off, and we took off in a Chinook. And we were the last helicopter out of Quezon, and I laid down and they held my feet, and I had a camera, one of these little Instamatic cameras, and I hung out the back of a Chinook, and I took some pictures of them. And well, we were the last helicopter out at the end of Quezon, from the time it started through the siege till the copter. I did hear that the Army went back in and revamped it in the 70s sometime, but in 68, that was it. And I think that was, I have a photograph of it. Do I have it?
Yeah, it's up, it'll be on the tape.
It'll be on the tape, and of that, and I had written on the back that I thought that was on July 1, 1968 was the day. Because I know I was back, all the way back into Fubai on July 4th. I know I had made it all the way back, because on July 4th, they didn't want us drinking, drunk stuff. Then we had an EM club, but they went and they worked us all day putting in fence, pounding in posts and stuff on July 4th. You know, you come in and you just spend all day, and it's 107 degrees out. And that's, I left there and went back to from Quezon to Fubai. Fubai, we got sent in the main side. The ammo dump was taken over by the Army. The Last day we were in Fubai, Lieutenant Nat took us to the enlisted men's club that evening, and everybody got drunker skunks. And I was out later that night sometime, I was puking my brains out, and I tramped on a rat. He bit the hell out of my foot, and when we went over to sick bay, and they cleaned it up, and they says, come back in the morning and we'll start you on shots for rabies. Well, next morning I jumped on a plane with everybody else and went to Da Nang. And the guys who knew me, they said, we'll keep an eye on you. You'd start doing anything weird, we'll get you in. I says, well, it'll probably be too late, but I had seen one guy who had the shots and they give them to you in his stomach. And he says he thinks it's like 21 of them. Every day in the morning you had to go get this shot. And he said it felt like the GG shot, that gamma globin they gave you in the ass. It hurt so bad. Well, he says they feel the same way, only you got 21 of them here. So it was kind of like I was trying to avoid it. I figured I pissed him off. He just wanted to eat the puke, and I tramped on him. So I got down there to Da Nang and got put on night crew. And after a few days there, I asked my commanding officer if I could have the next day off. And he looked at me and says, we're 24/7 here. What in the world are you doing? I said, well, I'm in all these places and that, and I'm going to turn 19 tomorrow, my 19th birthday. I thought I'd like to go get drunk. And he sat there and looked at me and says, you've been here since when? April? You've been the case on? Yes, sir. Okay. And got his wallet out and gave me a $5 bill and said, yeah, you can have the day off and have these on me. And that was it. And that was pretty much it. I, got drunk, came back and did night crew.
Yeah, when you got into Da Nang, I mean, knowing they were thinking you were a boot still. Was that at Da Nang?
Oh, that was back at when I got back to Fubai.
Okay.
The sergeants and corporals at Fubai who were at Quezon, when I replaced, they didn't know me, so they thought I was a cherry coming in, and they started harassing me, and they gave me an order to go out and inventory the blasting caps. And I knew in my heart that they were jerking me around, but they just, I'm giving you a direct order, this is what you're gonna do. We want it by morning. Yes, sir. Okay. So I did. I went out and I walked out at night into the black ammo dump and got into the grade 3 ammunition where the Conex boxes, which was filled with blasting caps. And I don't remember having a flashlight. I always remember having a Bic lighter. And I think I took a Bic lighter and a can of fluid. And that's what I was using for light. Inventory. And I sat there, and sometime at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard this horrendous crash. And I jumped up, and here's balls of flames. I'm in an ammo dump. It's in there too. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So I ran over to the fire and got over this one berm, and here a plane, I don't know any kind of plane, but here's a plane and it's on fire. Everything is on fire. It's in a part of the dump that was a swamp area, and all the jet fuel stuff was going over, and it had weeds grown in it, so when the burning got there, it used it like candles and lit and burnt up trees and brush and stuff, and it was all burning and floating on the water, and I could see somebody in the plane. So I got in there and I started splashing the water to see how you move
Burning jet fuel out
to
of
jet
it.
fuel that's burning, and get it away, and that too, so I could get to the wing, and I finally did. It kept coming back, but you keep splashing it, and finally I got to the wing, crawled up on the wing, and I got there, and there's a guy in there, the pilot, and I went there, but I don't know anything about how they put their flying
on.
stuff on. They put seatbelts and stuff. I know nothing, and it's dark except for the flickers of the burning plane and stuff. And I'm putzing around until I finally got it unhooked and got this guy out of his helmet, and it had hoses on it and stuff, and I got him out. I drug him out and ended up putting him on my shoulder, walked to the edge of the wing again, and jumped into the swamp area. And it's really hard to walk with an extra person on you, and I'm going through, and I got to the shore, but it was real steep, and I kept falling back, and one time I fell and I threw him on the shore, and he heard this oof, and then this guy opens his eyes, and there, oh no, what are you doing? And he was just talking. I says, you're in Fubai, ASP1, but you want to walk that way on top of the berms to get out of here. And he says, well, where's my co-pilot? And I says, I don't know. And he says, well, he ejected right before we hit, and he went through the canopy, but I went looking through the swamp, and I found out in the distance I could see some white, and it was a parachute. I got to the parachute and followed it to the seat. Well, I found a seat with a person in it, but he was seat facing down in the mud. He was, I'm sure, dead by the time I had done everything else. But I was out there and I rocked him over and cooked the mud and stuff and cleared his face, but I couldn't get him out of the harness thing that they wear. And I did that, and then finally some of the other guys from Fubai were coming over to see what happened, and they helped me drag it over. And then they said, well, did you do CPR? No. He'd been down in the mud for quite a while. Man, you're not allowed. You got to do CPR. And I couldn't, I wasn't. I blew in and he would bubble blood out, and basically we did that for about half an hour, 40 minutes, till a rescue helicopter came, and then the other guys came and got it out of the water and got him up in there. And then that was it. Everybody went back, and I went back and finished my inventory. And about dawn, I coming back, and I'm covered in mud and stuff. But I got this stupid list of the inventory, and they're having formation. And I come walking up, and he says, "Get out of here, Staples." What the fuck? You know, and I started this story, and I told him what I did. And I says, "So I need to take a shower, please. And I could use some sleep too." And then the commanding Mr. Nat come over, and they were asking me questions and that, and I says, "I don't know where that other guy went. When I left him, I went back to the Connex box. I don't know." So there may be some pilot wandering around out there. And that was pretty much it. I just asked him if that was the what I could expect for treatment from here on in. And Mike Gunny says, "God, no." He says, "They'll never do that to you again." And nobody ever, at that point, I guess I got creds from the guys and that, and I never had any problems after that. Once they figured out I was in Quezon and was with EOD and Way and did this, they let me alone. But I was back in Da Nang, pretty much just working the night crew making. We would make the convoys at night. We'd load them up, and we were on the radio. Bullet 1 was our call sign, and they would call in needs to not Quezon, but Dong Ha, Quang Tri, Chulai, something like that. And they would say, "We need this kind of resupply," and then we'd order trucks, tractor trailers, and most of the times there was 3 to 4 of those, and they'd be 100 tractor trailers big, and all the guys would be out in the dump all night long, loading them up, and then they'd do a big staging area, and then in the mornings the other guys' trucks would come. They were going to be in a convoy with food and lumber and stuff I never knew. And at dawn, they would take off, and there would be like 300 or 400 trucks out the door and going their way, you know. And that's about the time I would be done my shift. And then the one night I was at, it was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they came in, the forklift operators said they had people running around in the dump, and they thought they were sappers. So they got out and evacuated all the forklift guys and all the trucks that were trying to get loaded, got them out, and then they called in the C-47
Gunship.
Snoopy, and he would drop aircraft flares up in the sky, and we were to go out and hunt these people running around in the dump. Now the dump is, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles long and 2.5 miles wide, and big slope up on the hill. And so there's a lot of room. And while I was at the office, and Sergeant Ski had a mule, and while we're watching, trying to get a plan going, one of the flares just came out, and not a balloon,
Just came directly down.
it just spiraled the parachute, and it came down, but it's after it hit the ground, it lit, and it was an aircraft flare, which is about 7 foot long and about 6-7 inches in diameter. It's a 4 million candle power magnesium flare, and it landed in the dump. It, like the other ones, were floating with the parachutes, but this one, so Sergeant Ski is, come on guys, and we jumped on the mule and drove up and drove down this run, and there it was. Here's a berm that's about 200 feet long and 150 feet deep, and it's filled with 500-pound bombs, 6 pallets high, 3 to a pallet, and the flares on top. So he says he's off, and I jumped off the back because I'd fought fires before with EOD and stuff, and so they had these huge red water barrels that the Seabees would come around and fill. They weren't a 55-gallon drum. They were like 4 or 5 feet across and had a big wooden lid that would fold up from either side, and then had a big bar across it, and that's where these big, maybe 5-gallon buckets were. And so I grabbed one and filled it up and filled the other one up and climbed up the bombs to get over to the flare and tried throwing water on it, but I guess water doesn't do anything to magnesium other than piss it off. And so one of the other times I tried to smother it with my flak jacket. Well, it just melted that into a puddle. And I said, oh well. So I just kept going back between the barrel and coming up and pouring on it. And then one of the times I was walking across the bombs to get to it, and it went out. And it was, but when it went out, I couldn't see anything because my eyes had been burnt. And I'm yelling, and the guys come back, and I says, it's out, but I can't see, come get me. And he says, no, it's still burning. I'm going over to where I thought it was, and I can't really see. And I'm standing there looking, and I can see some flickers, and I just pour this buckets over. And then I says, I think it's out now. And they came and got me and took me to sick bay and gave me this, squirted this stuff in my eyes. It was like a flash burn from welding, you know. Only I had it terrible. It hurt like this Dickens. And they walked me around for about 2 days until I could, quit. All this crud out of your eyes comes up and forms, and it's terrible. Every morning they would come by and break open my eyelashes and stuff. It would crusted up, and put more stuff in and try to get me back. And then finally I could see enough to walk around. And that's really about it. Next.
Let's talk about dog patch and burning weeds.
Oh, well, that was the, now that was, when I did that in, when I was, okay, I'm confused here. I was at the fire. The commanding officer called me and showed me the photographs where it had burnt. The bombs had melted through the tips and butts of the bombs, and the last thing I had done was pour the water on the explosive that was burning. Then that was in February, and I got up to okay, one morning, Sunday morning, I got up, or I got out of work, and I was just coming back from the chow hall when the whistles started going off, usually for incoming and that, and everything was crazy. Everybody's running around and what's going on? So I went over to my hooch and that, and nobody's there. And I ran out the back and I see a truck and it's got the EOD guys in it who all knew me. And they says, "Hey, Staples, come with us. The dump's on fire." So I jumped in the truck with the EOD guys and we went in when everybody else is trying to get out with the forklifts and all the trucks and PCs and that. They're trying to get out and we're fighting our way to get in because the grade 3 ammunition, the dog patch had Sunday mornings they burnt their trash, but that morning it was really windy and apparently it had blown stuff from there into the ammo dump in the grade 3 ammo. That's where all the junk was that needed destroyed, but it left to go and it was all high in weeds, but they were left over from last summer and they were tall. Well, it got into them and that started, and then the grade 3 ammunition started and started spewing out stuff, and it got into the ammo dump proper and set those mass detonations off and that. So I was up in the dump and it was getting bigger and bigger, and we're running around and I'm trying to, there's only certain things you can ignore because it doesn't matter, but some of the things like the white phosphorus rounds, there were big berms of white phosphorus and I didn't want anywhere near that stuff. But finally it just got up and set off the powder magazine, which as it blew up the one section, it blew all the pallets of stuff, but they were burning and breaking and blowing up as they went and made this huge blast. Huge, I mean, knock you on the ground blast, and spread pellets, burning pellets of powder, because they're big thumb-sized chunks and that, big, everywhere. And that was it. It was everywhere, because everything was covered with stuff that was burning. And I went back to the main office and the gunny who I worked for at night, he was there, and there's a big, huge bunker covered with sandbags and stuff, and they were down there with the EOD guys, and up pulls a tank, and they were talking to them, and the gunny come over and says, "It'll take two, you and you, get in." And the other guy was in the towers around the ammo dump, and he was on guard. And the gunny and all the EOD guys, I guess, but it blew up for 48 hours. But we jumped into a tank, and there's not much room, and you can't stand up in them right. And then we got in there, and they says, "You grab here, and grab here. Don't grab anything else." And fine. And it's dark in there until you get your eyes adjusted. And then, so I'm talking to everybody. I'm saying, and we're driving out through the staging area where all the trucks would stage, and the whole ammo dump is rocking its brains out, and the stuff is flying, and you thought, boom, boom, you can hear it inside, and the stuff is ricocheting off of the tank. And they drive up, and I says, well, drop me off at my compound, which was 2 miles up the road. And we got there, and he says, your compound doesn't exist. It's gone. It's into a big pile. And the detonations of the dump had blown away the ammo and bulk fuel billets, all the hoochers and everything. That whole area was gone. All the trees were knocked over and leafless. And it also blew away the 3rd MAF brig, which was right up the road past us on the right. And it blew them. They had the prisoners on sitting down in a pile, in a circle, guards around them. And they ended up walking up to tank battalion. That's where I was in a tank. So we just passed everybody and drove up there and got out, and here there were some other guys who had got that far too. And so we sat on the bank overlooking the hillside where everything was happening, thinking, we're a mile and a half away and up a hill, until some 200-pound chunks of shrapnel come thumping. And they hit there, and there maybe 20, 30 of them, and they evacuated the tank battalion then. And so we hopped on a truck and eventually got out to ASP2, this other ammo dump, and they threw up some tents for us. But that was pretty much it. I stayed there, but when the time the ammo dump blew up, my rotation, I already had a date to go home. And my commanding officer says, nah, you're staying till we get this figured out. And so I had to stay there longer. Because I was there until May, sometime 15th or 16th, something. Again, it's blurry because I can never figure out these endpoints because I didn't know. But then one day they told me,
Get on a
Corporal
plane.
Stables, go home. And so I finally got home and went back. I got stationed at Camp Lejeune, and they got a mandatory quota to fill, and I went to, one was Osaka, Japan, embassy duty, and one was 2 guys to go to Hawaii. My buddy says, let's go to Hawaii. So we did, and I got there. He went to Kaneohe Bay on guard, and I was a brig guard at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Well, I ended up getting a Bronze Star for fighting the fire, and it caught up to me in Hawaii when I was there. And on the morning of the Marine Corps birthday, it's the biggest day of the year for the Marines, we were in formation, and the commanding officer was there and that, and giving this, and he says, and today got a special event. We're giving, we have combat medals to give, and they said to the gunny something, and I heard Corporals or Lance Corporal Staples. At the time, I'm a corporal, and it's Lance Corporal Staples front and center. I said, gee, I didn't know there's somebody named Staples here too. And I'm looking around, and the gunny come back and says, Staples, front and center. What do you do, gunny? He says, follow me. Stand here. Yes, sir. And then the commanding officer, and that's when he reads the citation to me, because I had no, and that's when they pinned on the Bronze Star with a Combat V for Valor for it. And I was the guest of honor at lunch, but they went and got me to the tailor, and they fit me up in a dress blues. And that night at the Marine Corps Ball in Pearl Harbor, I went down there and was the guest of honor at the Marine Corps Ball. I sat at the table with all the admirals and generals and stuff, and had Waker. It was kind of neat.
Well, at some point your service ended, you came home. Did you marry the girl or not?
No, I didn't. As a matter of fact, what actually happened, she got somebody else, but I was sitting at home at my mother's house, and a car pulled up in the driveway, and a sheriff and a guy in a gray suit came and knocked on my door, and I answered the door. May I help you? He says, are you James Gordon Staples? I says, yes, I am. Could you step out here, please? And I stepped out on the porch, and they threw me up against the wall and handcuffed me. And I'm like, wait, what in the world did I do? And they read me my rights and stuff. And here, because I enlisted when I was 17, I didn't sign up for the draft when I turned 18. I was already in the Marines. So I thought, but then I had to, my mother was upset, and she got my orders and my discharge and all this, the paperwork got, and they read it before they'd unhandcuff me as a deserter or something. I said, I'm a combat vet. And so they finally read the papers and saw that I was, and then they made me come in the next day to the federal building in Pittsburgh, and I had to sign up for the draft.
Yeah, basically, very quickly, what did you do for your life's work when you finally got back? And you had to deal with PTSD.
Yeah, well, first 2 years I couldn't get a job. When I got home, they spit on me at Norton Air Force Base. Well, not at Norton, at LAX when I got there. And they chased me through LAX with signs into a restaurant and they finally threw food on me, and the guy come out from the back and chased them out and helped me get cleaned up so I could get a flight home. That's what I came home to. And when I got out of the service, I couldn't get a job. Nobody'd hire me because I was a veteran. I was a baby killer and a drug addict was what they called me. And it was just horrible. Nobody welcomed me home. There wasn't anything thanks for your service, like today. And it was 2 years, and a girl I knew in high school, I was drunk, and I was sitting there going, I can't believe it. I did this, and here I am sitting at home, and I can't get a job because I was a Vietnam vet. I can't get it. And she told her dad he worked at a place in Shadyside and got Roller Brothers, and talked to the boss, and he called me at home and says, come in tomorrow morning, I got you a job. And I worked as a driver to do for the heating, ventilating, air conditioning, plumbing in Squirrel Hill, that area. But that was it. I went to night school for architectural drafting. I got a job doing electrical drafting, and it turned out I was really good at it. And I got another job, and I liked to be out in the field, so I went out into the steel mills, and I felt at home, so they would let me out and give me the jobs where I could be on my own, because I couldn't hear good. And so they would separate the jobs I had. I could do the field work and do it on my own and come back and give other people stuff to do. And I did that for almost 20 years. I was all over the United States and the world, down to Jamaica, Brazil, and a lot in Canada, building steel mills and casters and rail mills, and the biggest, slab reheat furnaces for the hot mills and things like that. And then finally, I couldn't get a job anymore when I got laid off. So I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna go and back to school. And I went back to IUP and got a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, and graduated and became an RN, and did that for 15 years. I worked in med-surg oncology. It seemed to fit, but it was only in 2010 that I got the brain bleed and went to Presby, was in a coma for 19 days, and then I came out, and it took me 3 months at Harmerville Rehab so I could walk and talk and that
Function.
But I couldn't afford my Cobra. I couldn't afford to pay it. So I got my DD-214 and came to Butler, and that's how I got into the VA system. And then they have helped me ever since then.
Well, at this point, let me thank you for your service
Thank you.
to this nation. It was a long time. First time somebody told me that, I started to bawl.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
And-
It was 19 years when I was at a sportsman show. I saw they had hats with Vietnam veteran, and I was looking at them there for $5, and the guy says, "Are you a veteran?" I said, "Oh shit, here it goes." I said, "Yeah." And he stuck out his hand and says, "Welcome home." That was the first person, not my parents, any friends, or anybody that I knew, had said anything other than being derogatory about the vets causing the war. And I couldn't even vote then, I wasn't old enough. And they finished me off. But that was the end of that. I got with the VA and they helped me get it, and I'm still working on my hearing claim for service connection with tinnitus, and that's where I'm at today. Still waiting. I've seen the federal judge and I'm waiting. It's only been since April of 2014 till now that I've been waiting to get a decision on my appeals. And here I am.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.